Hello and welcome back. Sorry it took so long, but the subject of this review took a lot longer to get through than I expected. That being Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So, let's get into it. The story takes place in ancient Greece during the Peloponnesian War, where you play as one of two siblings, either Alexios or Cassandra, who were kicked out of their home Sparta because of some bullshit prophecy, and the sibling that you didn't choose being presumed dead. So your character takes up the role of a mercenary, and what starts as just an assassination attempt on your father unfolds into this giant conspiracy involving this game's Templar equivalent called the Cult of Cosmos, who are manipulating the war on both sides. Oh, and it turns out that your character's sibling is still alive, but has been raised and brainwashed by the cult and now goes by the name Demos. At this point, the story splits off into three major plots. One where you track down Demos and uncover the conspiracy, one where you take down the individual members of the cult, where you track down your ancestral connections to the ancients and the lost city of Atlantis. There are also some interludes that take place in the modern day, but let's be fair, no one really cares about those. And with all these plot lines plus the DLCs, the game doesn't really have a definitive ending, as you can basically complete them in any order you want. The game is one of those open world exploration types with some RPG elements, and what an open world it is. It's absolutely massive and extremely detailed, even if the assets are reused throughout the game. But it is extremely immersive and really makes you feel like you're travelling through the lands of ancient Greece. Combat-wise, while the option of stealth kills are still in the game, there aren't a guaranteed kill on every enemy, especially ones that are either higher level or more priority targets. Thankfully, the combat is extremely fleshed out with light attacks, heavy attacks, dodging, parrying, using ranged weapons and abilities that you can gain from leveling up. Probably the most noticeable inclusion to this game that makes it stand out from its predecessors is the multiple dialogue options, which, depending on the situation, can either radically change or have massive consequences on what you're doing, or barely affect the game at all. The ship combat is also back, although I don't think I quite as enjoyed it this time as much as I did Black Flag or even Rogue. One neat addition though is you can gain crew for your ship by either abducting them or recruiting them, and equipping those crewmates gives your ship certain buffs, although there is a limit to how many crewmates you can equip. There are also romance options, although they only really show up for their specific quest line, and afterwards they're really never mentioned or show up again. And speaking of quest lines, this game has a metric ass ton of quests, some of which are really good and others are kind of meh. But hey, such is the rule of quantity to quality. Also, if you cause enough ruckus, they'll send mercenaries after you. They're extremely hard to fight, but if you do beat them, you can get specific weapons from them. Or you can avoid fighting them, instead just pay off your own bounty or murder the guy that set up the bounty in the first place. And last but by no means least, you have the conquest system, where after weakening the troops, supplies and leadership of a certain area, you can participate in a battle on either side of the war to determine which group gets control of that area. There are also lots of weapons and armours of several varieties and rarities, which unfortunately also ties into the cash shop that sells specific item, skins and even levels to quickly level up your character, all in exchange for your own cold hard cash. Although some of the items can also be bought on an in-game merchant using orichalcum that you find scattered about the world. The historical tour mode is also back for those that are into that sort of thing. The graphics are just chef's kiss. From all the detail in the characters, buildings, mountains, landscape, plants, just wonderful. The only real issue I have with the graphics is because of the high graphics as well as the size of the world, it does mean that sometimes it takes a while for the graphics to fully load into an area. And thankfully Music Meister's back to actually handle the music this time. Thank you, Chris. Well, I could definitely say that while some of the soundtrack does fade into the backgrounds like previous Assassin's Creed games, there are some standout tracks in this, with special mention going to the many tracks played during combat, as well as the game's main theme. I generally enjoyed this game despite its monetization and debatably excessive length. Although at this point, I question why the series is even still called Assassin's Creed. And I think that fact is probably what's going to divide most long-term fans of whether they want to play this game or not. As for a more general audience, I'd say it's worth giving a go. Well, that's all from me. See you guys next time.